I can't stay here anymore.
The security guard's walkie-talkie crackled like it had a grudge. Someone important was coming up to the executive floor. And the air got that stiff, expensive smell it always got whenever suits felt insecure. The receptionist sat straighter. The assistant managers started whispering like kids who'd just heard the teacher's footsteps. Even the glass walls seemed to hold their breath. And then there I was standing in the lobby with a visitor badge clipped to my jacket, holding nothing but a plain black folder and the kind of calm you only get when you've already lived through worse. If you looked at me from a distance, you might have assumed I was another quiet consultant. Or maybe someone's support staff. Not flashy, not loud, not important looking. Which was funny because I was the only person in that building who could fire half the floor with a signature. The irony didn't hit them yet. It never does at first. People see what they want to see. A humble outfit, a soft voice, a face they don't recognize. They don't see the long nights, the sacrifices, the private wins that don't come with applause. They don't see the version of you that survived the dark. A couple of executives walked by and barely glanced my way. I heard one of them say something about some new guy from the investment side. Like I was furniture that had recently been moved. Another gave me a polite nod, the kind you give a delivery driver when you're feeling generous. I almost smiled, because if they knew my name, if they knew the signature on the ownership papers, if they knew the person they were about to sit across from in the boardroom, it'd be sweating through those tailored shirts. See, today wasn't just another meeting. Was the moment everything that had ever been taken from me came circling back, not with revenge, but with truth. This was the moment the world finally had to recognize what my family never did. So yeah, before I walked through those glass doors, let me rewind. Because you don't go from being thrown out of your own home to owning the company that hired your golden child's sister by accident. That kind of story gets built slowly in silence. On the days nobody clapped, let's go back to where I started. Back before the badge, before the building. Before the life that looks like a plot twist. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travel. Growing up, our house had a rule that wasn't written down, but everybody knew it. My sister was the future, and I was the backup plan. She was the one my parents bragged about. It's the one teachers called special. It's the one relatives pinched on the cheek and predicted big things for before she'd even figured out how to ride a bike. And me. I was the kid who was so helpful. The kid who was good with chores. The kid who was mature for his age, which is adult speak for he's already learning to survive disappointment. It wasn't that my parents hated me. Hate takes energy. They were too busy, investing all their love into one kid like the rest of us were stocks they didn't believe in. I was just background noise, the dependable one, the emotional utility knife they pulled out when something needed fixing. If my sister wanted a new phone, she got it. If I wanted a book, I got a lecture about priorities. She needed a ride to a friend's house, my parents moved mountains. If I had a school event, they told me to take pictures for us. You learn early in that kind of home. You learn not to ask for much. You learn to celebrate quietly. You learn to swallow your wins like medicine, no expression, no fuss. Just keep moving. The good thing about being ignored is you get time alone with your thoughts. That's where my dreams grew. Not in encouragement, but in secret. I liked numbers. I liked patterns. I liked the way a system could look chaotic from the outside, but make perfect sense once you figured out the rules. I didn't know what business meant yet. I knew something in me lit up whenever money and logic crossed paths. By high school, I was hustling without calling it that, fixing neighbors' computers, doing homework for kids who didn't care, selling snacks out of my backpack. Not because I was greedy, but because I wanted independence. When you feel like an afterthought, earning your own way sounds like Oxygen.College was my escape plan. I applied for scholarships like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. I got into a decent state school, nothing fancy, but I was proud. I remember bringing the acceptance letter home, heart pounding, expecting at least a flicker of pride. My mother glanced at it and said, "That was nice." My father asked how much it would cost them. When I said I had a full financial aid package and a campus job lined up, he relaxed like I'd just told him the car repairs would be covered. Then he reminded me not to let it distract me from helping the family. Helping the family. That phrase was their favorite lease on my future. So I went anyway. I worked in the library, then in the cafeteria, then as a resident assistant. I pulled all-nighters, not for parties who had energy for that, but for classes I was terrified to fail because I couldn't afford to. I studied. Finance and operations devoured anything about entrepreneurship, and built tiny side projects that made me feel like I was building some kind of ladder out of the life I was born into. I never told my parents about the online courses I took. They didn't ask. Never told them about the small investment club I joined. They wouldn't have understood. Never told them about the internship. I landed sophomore year. Just kept my head down and collected skills like tools. By the time I graduated, I had a resume that was stronger than anyone in my family realized. I had ideas. I had momentum. I also had that old familiar ache, the sense that no matter what I did, I'd still be the other kid. But I thought, maybe once I'm out of school, once I'm earning, once I'm contributing like they always wanted, maybe they'll finally see me. That was my first mistake, because right around then, my sister landed her first real job. Not just any job. She got hired at a fast-growing tech company downtown. It's the kind of company my parents had read about in business magazines. It's the kind with trendy offices and stock options and fancy coffee machines people posted online. She came home waving an offer letter like a trophy. Her parents threw a mini party on a Tuesday. They told relatives. They posted a proud photo. They talked about her bright future like it was a movie premiere. Then they looked at me. I had just gotten a decent entry-level role at a small financial services firm. Nothing glamorous, but solid. I was excited. Thought they'd be happy. Instead, the mood shifted. My father started talking about how the house was getting crowded. My mother mentioned how I was old enough to be on my own. They said since my sister would now be helping financially, it was time for me to go build my own life and stop leaning on them. Asterisk, leaning on them. I had been paying for my own essentials since college. I'd sent money home when I could. I'd babysat their stress, their expectations, their messes. I was the one who fixed the washer, drove my aunt to appointments, helped my cousin with homework, and filled gaps no one else even saw. But in their eyes, my sister's job was a sunrise. My presence was clutter, so they kicked me out. Not with shouting and drama, with polite, cold efficiency. A deadline, a few cardboard boxes. A reminder that I should be grateful they let me stay this long. I didn't cry in front of them. Pride is weird like that. It shows up when love DOESN, single quotes too. I walked out with 2 suitcases, some books, and a laptop I'd bought on sale. I slept on a friend's couch for a while. I ate noodles and eggs. I learned how quiet the world gets when you stop expecting people to care. And somewhere in that quiet, a different part of me woke up. Not anger, not revenge, just this steady, stubborn realization. If I was invisible to them, I was going to become undeniable to myself. Being kicked out doesn't magically turn you into a success story. First, it turns you into someone who Googles renting with bad credit. At 2 a.m., it turns you into someone who knows exactly how many days a bag of rice can stretch. It turns you into someone who walks into work wearing the same blazer 3 days in a row and prays nobody notices. The first time I walked into their executive floor after the acquisition, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt grounded. Like a person who had carried a weight for years and finally set it down carefully. Not dramatically, the leadership team had scheduled a transition alignment meeting. Big phrase for a room full of anxious people about to learn they weren't steering anymore. They had been kings of their own castle. Now they were tenants in a new structure. I arrived early, not as a power move, but because punctuality is a habit that sticks when you've had to fight for every inch. The assistants and junior managers eyed me with that polite suspicion reserved for outsiders. A couple of executives brushed past, assuming I was part of some advisory group. Nobody asked questions. Nobody offered introductions. I was invisible again. I let it happen. There's a kind of strength in not rushing the truth, in letting people underestimate you right up until the moment they can't, when the meeting started. The CEO did what CEOs do when they're scared. He tried to control the narrative. He talked about synergy, growth opportunities, and how the company culture needed to be protected. He spoke like someone reading a script he didn't write but needed to believe. Then the head partner from my firm began introducing the new ownership structure. My name came up casually, almost like a footnote. But I saw the shift. Heads turned, brows lifted. People started scanning their mental files, trying to connect dots. Then the CEO looked at me directly for the first time, and I watched his face do that slow, confused math. Because he knew me, not as an owner, as the kid he had once interviewed for an internship years ago at a different company and turned down with a smug line about not being a cultural fit. He still didn't understand what he was looking at. He tried to regain control by making a small joke about how support staff should wait outside until called in, not realizing who he was talking about. The room chuckled politely, the way people do when they're afraid not to. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. Let the silence stretch a moment longer than comfortable. Then I stood not to humiliate him, but to anchor the truth. I explained calmly that I was part of the acquisition team and now a significant shareholder. I outlined my role in the transition. I thanked the employees for their work and I laid out the priorities: transparency, stability, long-term growth. No raised voice, no theatrics, just a quiet, unmovable reality. The air in the room changed. It wasn't fear exactly. It was the feeling of a stage flipping, of a story turning against the people who thought they were the authors. I didn't need applause. I could feel respect settling in like gravity. And then the door opened. My sister walked in. She was late, clearly rushed from another meeting. She had that corporate glow people get when they believe they're climbing. Confident posture, laptop tucked under her arm, eyes scanning for familiar faces. She didn't look at me at first. She took a seat, smiled at the CEO, and opened her notes. Then she heard my voice. I watched her freeze. Her head turned slowly toward me, like someone rewinding a memory to make sure they weren't hallucinating. Her eyes widened, not with pride, with shock. Because the last time she had seen me, I was hauling boxes out of the house while she stood behind our parents like a witness to a verdict she didn't question. She looked like she was waiting for someone to explain what was happening. But nobody did, because I was the explanation. The moment was sharp, not because I wanted power over her, but because in that instant, the entire family story they had built, the one where I was the expendable kid and she was the chosen one, collapsed in real time. The meeting continued. My sister barely spoke. Her hands trembled on her keyboard. She wasn't angry yet. She was just rearranging reality. And in a strange way, I felt sad for her. Not because I was above her, but because I knew what it was. Like to be trapped inside the version of you your parents praised. It's a cage to dot, dear audience. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps. I got a tiny studio apartment on the edge of town. It wasn't cute, was functional. The heater sounded like it was coughing up a lung. The windows didn't quite seal, but it was mine, and that alone felt like a kind of victory. At my job, I worked hard, too hard, maybe. I was the first in, last out, the one who volunteered for messy spreadsheets no one wanted. Not because I was trying to impress anyone. I was trying to build something that couldn't be taken from me. And the thing about being the kid nobody expected much from, you learn to over-prepare. So while others were clocking out, I was learning, reading market reports, watching lectures, practicing financial modeling, teaching myself how businesses scale and how they fail. Sometimes I did it with a half-broken phone plugged into a wall because I didn't have a desk yet. Didn't care. I felt like I was sharpening a blade the world didn't know I had. A year in, my firm got acquired by a mid-size investment group. It came with layoffs and reshuffles. I survived the first round. Then a senior analyst quit unexpectedly, leaving a hole on a major due diligence project. Most people ducked. I raised my hand. The project was evaluating a booming tech company for a potential investment. A company known for a flashy brand, aggressive growth, and internal rumors about unstable finances. A company my sister worked for, even typing that feels wild now. At the time, it felt like fate cracking a door open just to see if I'd walk through. I didn't tell anyone I had a family connection there. Not because I was hiding, but because it didn't matter. I wasn't there as a brother. I was there as an analyst with a job to do. The deeper I dug, the weirder things looked. Their revenue was strong on paper, but the cash flow had inconsistencies. Their expense reporting was too clean, almost curated. Some numbers didn't behave like real numbers do. You've ever stared at enough financial statements, you know the difference between growth and performance theater? I flagged it. My manager shrugged. The leadership team liked the company's story. They didn't want to hear the boring guy with a spreadsheet say, "Slow down." So I dug deeper on my own time. That's when I found what I can only describe as an elegant mess. A series of internal transfers that hid losses. A growth narrative being propped up by creative accounting. Nothing that screamed fraud right away, just enough smoke that any responsible investor should pause. I built a full model. I wrote a quiet report that didn't accuse, but warned. I sent it up the chain and got ignored. A week later, the investment group moved forward anyway. Big money, big headlines. Celebratory emails. I felt sick, not because I wanted them to stop investing. I'm not against risk. I'm against pretending risk doesn't exist. But here was the real twist. If this company collapsed, and I believed it wouldn't just be investors hurt. Regular employees would get destroyed, including my sister, including thousands of people who trusted leaders to tell the truth. So I did something I almost didn't do. I reached out directly to a partner. I'd met at a finance conference months earlier, someone known for listening when others didn't. I shared my analysis, not my feelings, just numbers, patterns, evidence. Risky asked me to come in. I expected a 15-minute brush-off. Instead, I found myself in a room with serious people. People who didn't care about my family drama. People who cared about whether my analysis could save them from pouring gasoline on a fire. They grilled me for hours. I answered calmly, thoroughly. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't beg. 2 days later, I got a call. They wanted me to join a special investment task force. Not in my old firm, with them. It's the grown-up side of the table. The pay bump alone could have changed my whole life. But what really stunned me was the trust. These people didn't know me personally. They knew my work. For the first time, somebody was seeing me through the only lens I ever wanted: value. I said yes. That year was brutal. Long hours, constant travel, high pressure. If I was alive in a way I hadn't been since college, I learned more in 12 months than I had in 5 years. I got mentored, challenged, and pushed into rooms people said I didn't belong in. And all the while, the tech company my sister worked for kept expanding fast. Too fast. They hired thousands. They burned cash like it was confetti. They chased headlines like Oxygen. Our task force watched. Waiting, studying, then the market turned. A major client pulled out. The company's stock dipped. Internally, panic started leaking into quiet decisions. They began looking for outside capital to stay afloat. That's when my new firm made a move. We weren't going to let them crumble into chaos. We planned a strategic takeover, quiet, calculated, structured to stabilize the company while protecting jobs. I worked on that deal day and night. It was strange sometimes, being so close to a company that had formed the centerpiece of my family's pride. I'd see employee newsletters pop up with photos of team events. I'd recognize the office in the background. I'd wonder if my sister realized how fragile her shiny new world was. But I didn't reach out. Not because I was cold, because I had learned something dangerous about family love that depends on your usefulness. It can flip on you anytime. I wasn't going to chase validation. I was going to build a life that didn't need it. The deal went through quietly at first, then publicly. And as part of the acquisition structure, surprising thing happened. I was offered a significant equity stake for my role in saving the deal and designing the post-merger strategy. The senior partners wanted me invested literally in the long-term turnaround. I accepted, which is how the kid who got kicked out with 2 suitcases became a major owner of the company his sister thought she was rising in. I told nobody. Not yet, because the story wasn't ready to turn. After that meeting, everything moved quickly. We stabilized the company. We cleaned up the financial reporting. We restructured departments without gutting people's lives. We added checks and balances not just to protect investors, but to protect employees from leadership ego. This wasn't a revenge takeover. It was a rescue mission disguised as business. My role expanded. I became one of the public faces of the turnaround. Not because I chased attention, but because the team wanted someone who understood the numbers and the people behind them. I pushed for training programs, internal promotions, clearer paths for working-class employees to rise. The company had been built on hype. Now it had to be built on trust. Funny thing about trust, it looks a lot like the kind of love I never got at home. Consistent, quiet, based on what you do. Not what people assume you are. As for my sister, she avoided me at first. Not in a petty way, but in a my brain is overloaded way. We were suddenly co-workers in a universe neither of us had imagined. Eventually, she asked to talk. We met in a neutral place, nothing dramatic, just coffee in a calm corner of the city. She was guarded. I was tired. Not tired of her, tired of the whole old story. She asked how. Not in a jealous tone, but in genuine disbelief. How had I gone from being the kid who never had direction, in her words, to owning the company she was proud to work for? So I told her the truth, not with bitterness, with clarity. I told her about being kicked out, about the nights, the learning, the overlooked report, the deal, the acquisition. I didn't throw my parents under the bus. I didn't need to. The facts did enough. She sat there quiet a long time. Then she said something that shocked me more than the boardroom moment. She apologized. Not a defensive apology. A real one. She said she had been so wrapped up in being the successful one that she had never questioned how much they asked me to carry. She admitted that part of her had always assumed I'd be okay because I was the strong one. She hadn't realized how expensive strength gets when nobody helps you hold it. We didn't suddenly become best friends. Healing isn't a montage. But it was a start. A week later, my parents called. Not because they heard from me, because the news hit the family grapevine. The takeover was public now. My name was in the business section. People who had never noticed me suddenly knew how to pronounce my full name. Their voices on the phone were syrupy. Proud, confused, interested. They spoke like they were trying on a new version of themselves, parents of a successful son. I listened. Then I told them I wasn't calling to punish them, but I wasn't playing pretend either. I told them what being kicked out did to me, how it reshaped my life, how I had learned to stop performing for love. There was silence on the line. The uncomfortable kind. The kind where people realize they can't edit the past. My mother cried softly. My father cleared his throat a lot. They said they didn't mean it like that. They said they were trying to do what's best. I didn't argue. I just said what's best now is honesty. If they wanted a relationship, it had to be based on who I was, not what I could provide. After that, things changed slowly. I didn't buy them a house. I didn't show up with checks to prove I was worthy. I didn't do any of the flashy things movies make you think you owe people who hurt you. I showed up with boundaries. And something surprising happened. Over time, they started to respect me. Not because their hearts magically transformed, but because power does something to people's eyesight. They could see me now. So they tried to learn me. It wasn't perfect, but it was realer than anything we'd had before. Meanwhile, I built a life that wasn't an argument with my childhood. I moved into a place that felt like peace. I mentored juniors the way I wish someone had mentored me. I invested in small community programs that helped kids like me learn finance early, so they didn't have to reverse engineer adulthood at 20. I stopped chasing the moment where my parents would finally clap, because I realized I didn't need that sound to know I'd made it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories every week. People love a story where the underdog wins and the bad guys get humbled. It's satisfying. It's clean. It's the kind of ending you can wrap in a bow. But real redemption doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it looks like a quiet person refusing to shrink anymore. Sometimes it looks like building a life so sturdy that the people who doubted you have to approach it carefully. Sometimes it looks like forgiving not because the past didn't hurt, but because you're tired of dragging it behind you like a chain. If you're listening to this and you've ever been the other kid, the one who got less attention, less patience, less belief, I need you to hear this clearly. Being underestimated is not a life sentence. It's a starting position. Your worth isn't measured by who claps for you early. It's measured by what you keep becoming when nobody's watching. My parents made a choice when they kicked me out. They thought they were clearing space for the child they believed in. What they actually did was hand me the freedom to become the person I was always meant to be. Here's the twist people don't expect. Owning that company didn't feel like revenge. It felt like closure. Because the real win wasn't the title or the shares. The real win was the moment I stopped needing them to see me before I could see myself. And the craziest part? A year after the acquisition, the company launched a scholarship fund for first-generation students in finance and tech. The fund was named after someone who had identified the truth when it was inconvenient. Someone who stood for integrity when the story was easier to fake. They wanted to name it after me. I said no. I asked them to name it after my grandmother instead, the only person in my childhood who ever slipped me $20 and said, quietly, that I had something special in me. She never lived to see how far I went, but she helped me start. So now, every year, kids who feel invisible get a ladder. That's the legacy I care about. So let me ask you this. How many people around you are quietly building a future while the world calls them ordinary? How many background characters are really just main characters waiting for their chapter? Don't overlook them. And if you feel like one yourself, keep going. Your plot twist might be closer than you think. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.